This is HHDG. We are on another episode of HHDG Media podcast. And shout out to our Facebook group, HHDG Hip Hop Discussion Group, tuning in. Shout out to all of y'all. Shout out to everyone on tuning in on YouTube right now in our HHDG Media channel. And as always, our crew that makes it possible, our company, HHDG Media Inc., Rock Vader KB, myself, Wiki, T. Smith, the Mayor, Skelly Top. Now, for tonight, we have a producer whose extensive history in music spans quite further than I expected. He's definitely has a vast range in his production with the sound. And like with hip hop, if you listen to other genres, it's almost always incorporated into our music. And he does a great job at doing that. We definitely want to get into his musical palette and where that came from. Talk a little bit about who he's worked with. Like I said, it's well beyond hip hop. And with that, he dropped a dope new album, The Ceremony of Innocence, on August 19th. Definitely check that out. And with that album, he's shown how much of a mastermind he is to put certain MCs together on tracks with a particular sound. We're also going to definitely get into the meaning of the album, how it came to be and what brought him back into start producing like this, and for this to be the album to come back with after, I believe it's about 7 years. It's amazing. Like I said, if you got the talent, it doesn't matter how long you take off, it's always going to be in you. And our producer for tonight goes by the name of Krohme. Definitely has shown us fans that. Right now he's repping Virginia, and I'd like to introduce Krohme.
Peace.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing good.
All right.
Yo, man. Now, before we got on, we were talking about the Funko Pop collection back there.
The collection, the vast collection. Yeah, there's about 200 or so. I keep telling myself I'm not going to get any more, and then I get another one every month or so, it seems like. So it happens. What are you going to do?
Yep. I got to stay away from them.
Right.
I'm like I was saying, so it's just going to take one.
They're addictive. I mean, once you get one, then you see another one, like, I need that one. I need that Chuck D. I need that Killmonger. You just have to have the next one in your collection.
Yeah. So before we get into your history, tell us which Funko Pop figure was the one that you really had to go digging for.
Oh man, I don't even know. I have so many at this point. It was actually so it was the Crow. And I'll preface this by saying that the Crow was my favorite movie when I was a teenager. It probably still is one of my favorite movies. But I had the Crow when it came out. I don't know when this was, like 2006, 2007, early Funko Pop days. I had it, took it out of the box, and it got beat up and everything. A few years later, you realize that these pops, they accrue value. So you realize that that one is no longer being manufactured. So now it's rare, and now it's worth like $100 or so. It's like, I should have kept that one. So then you're scouring around eBay trying to find, a mint pro, Funko Pop that's not going to cost you like $500. So, I finally found one. And I was like, that's the one, I need to have back in the collection because I screwed it up the first time. So, I wasn't going to mess it up the second time around. So, the Crow, somewhere around there, over there, I think.
Nice. Nice. Now, with your diverse
Mhm.
musical talents, tell us where that started with your coming up with your parents.
Right, right. So my parents, they have just a mix. So naturally there's going to be a difference in the background based on how they were raised and
Mm-hmm.
what they were exposed to when they were growing up. So for my father, it's a lot of jazz, a lot of soul, a lot of funk. My mother carried over into some of that soul, but then there was also rock as well. So when I was growing up, we had a lot of George Clinton, so a lot of funkadelic, a lot of Parliament, Parlette. We also had, we had early hip hop. We had Sugar Hill Gang, we had Run DMC, Curtis Blow, but then we would have the Eagles, Jethro Tull, David Bowie, and so all of that. You're listening to all that as you're growing up, and you could put on James Brown, and then transition to Run DMC, and then
Mm-hmm.
transition to Jethro Tull, for example, and all of these different sounds. You're appreciating all these different sounds and these different musicians and these different artists and the different way that they're creating their music, and that sort of lays the foundation for yourself as a musician. So, so it really, so for me, that laid the initial groundwork for what I was exposed to, and then it expanded really um, early '90s, when I started to listen more to. Obviously, I was always listening to hip hop all throughout the '80s, '90s, even now. It was hip hop was pretty much the central um, genre that I was really listening to. I was Public Enemy and Kid and Play and Kumo D and Stetsasonic. All those. I listened to all those. All throughout the '80s. '90s, you start to transition into not just hip hop, but you start getting into grunge. You start getting into metal. You start getting into the DC hardcore scene, which is hardcore punk in this area. You also start getting into more of the psychedelic rock, which really started to uh, kind of come back up. What was that? Uh, when they had the what was that, Woodstock '94? I think that was. That really started to kind of bring everyone's interest back into the original Woodstock artists. So you're listening to Jimi Hendrix again. You're listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival, while at the same time you're listening to the Wu Tang Clan. While at the same time, you're listening to Ice Cube. While you're listening to Nirvana. While you're listening to Pearl Jam. While you're listening to Minor Threat and Bad Brains, you listen, well, and Slayer and Sepultura. You listen to all these different bands and these different genres, and that really lays the foundation for uh, what I do now. So what I do now, the foundation is always hip hop, which is what it's
Mm-hmm.
been. It's been since I was a child. You're primarily listening to hip hop. So at its core, a lot of what I do is rooted in hip hop, but I try to expand upon that and bring in those other genres, those other sounds, and whether that's through sampling or working with different musicians or working with different artists, it's really bringing that all in with that foundation of hip hop. So you started to see a lot of that in the early '90s. You started to see more sampling with some of the artists that became popular. They would start to use more drum breaks in the production.
Right.
Trent Reznor with Nine Inch Nails, for example, would start to use more drum breaks. You White Zombie, you would start to hear more hip hop within uh, metal and alternative and rock, that you weren't previously hearing. Whereas in the past, you would have an actual drummer, playing out those patterns, and as it started to kind of meld in the '90s and blues genres, you start to get that. You start to get funky drummer in the background. You start to get you know different breaks that you weren't accustomed to hearing on a rock record. You're now hearing, and
Yeah.
so it feels more hip hop, and it was a natural evolution as well, because essentially a lot of the sampling they're doing is they're sampling their own genre at the same time. But that it is what it is.
Yeah. Mm. So with the music that you came up on,
Mhm.
what was the instrument of choice back then in elementary school?
So I actually played the cello when I was in elementary school. I was I played it for a few years. Kind of kind of accomplished as a cellist because there weren't a lot of kids playing the cello, and it's a
Hmm.
big, massive instrument that you're lugging around as a third, fourth, fifth, sixth grader. And no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to play the violin or the viola because it's this big and you can just throw it in your backpack
Easy to
and
carry.
go.
Yep.
Exactly. So I played the cello. Stopped that right around when I got into middle school. Uh, Started picking up the guitar in high school, but never really did more with the guitar than kind of riffs and stabs that I would later implement into some of the sampling that I would do later on in production. I was essentially sampling
Hmm.
myself. Um, but for the most part, um, anything that I played, whether it's guitars, keys, I picked that up on my own, and I just kind of play the melodies, figure it out, and I'll either play it out in its entirety or I'll sample myself. I'll play something and then chop it up and put it back in. Um, but for me, it was I don't play a lot of instruments. What I usually do is I defer to much more talented artists and musicians to
Gotcha.
really. I'll lay the foundation and I'll say, you do what you do best, and we'll go from there. So whether we'll jump to Line of Fire, for example. With Line of Fire, that's the single with Chuck D,
Check.
brother
Brother Ali.
Ali, and Speech of Arrested Development,
Yep.
and Doug Wimbish of Living Color, who also has a massive, massive discography. If you look into all of the songs he's produced, not produced for, he's played on, uh,
Hmm.
it's insane. I mean, like Mick Jagger and Madonna and Annie Lennox, like all of these amazing,
Well known
iconic
artist. Yeah.
artists.
Hmm.
Doug Wimbish was right there, and he's calling me. He's like, "Hey, just let me know what you need. I got it. I love your music." Uh,
Wow.
so what I did with that is I had a foundation for Line of Fire, and it was essentially just the drums. It was the drums and a rough sample that I had, a very bluesy sample, because I didn't want to go traditional, boom bap or some of the heavier, darker production that I do. I kind of wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more bluesy, kind of like a swampy blues, almost an ancestral type feel, something that, I told Doug this, that, my ancestors would have sung in North Carolina. Um, so I had the foundation for that and just gave him just the skeleton and told him, you do what you do best. You're a legend.
Hmm.
You lay down the bass and we'll go from there. And he did. He laid down the bass, killed it. And then we start putting the pieces back in. Brother Ali had his verse, Speech came in on the hook, then Chuck came in, remix and master, and it's a very different song, but at the same time, it's still very much what I am in the core. Drum breaks, vocal samples. Well, in this case, the vocal samples are actually speech. He's singing,
Hmm.
but I have I wouldn't say it's a formula, but there's a pattern that I have when I create my production that I try to integrate into whatever it is that I'm doing, and even if the sound varies a little bit, it's still at its core, a Chrome production.
Now, my question is,
Mhm,
being that um, with sampling and copyrights and everything,
mhm,
are there times where instead of going full on sample, that you would reach out to a musician
mhm.
to play a certain?
That actually happened with Doug Wimbish. Actually, I had sampled a song, not realizing that I was sampling work that he had done. So it was a bass line for an Annie Lennox song. The song is Precious. It's a pop song from like 1991, but it had this very distinct bass line. And so I filtered everything out and I took that and I used it for essentially the foundation of The Judgment. The Judgment is a song with Lord Jamar and Sadat X. And I had that and it just wasn't working for me because it felt like I was sampling. And I said, you know what? Let me find out who actually played this and see if they're still around and they can redo this. So I go to Discogs and look and see who played on it. Doug Wimbish. So I shoot him a text. I was like, I'm screwing up your bass line. I need you to step in and if you can do something similar for me. Brought it back 20, 30 minutes later. He gives me a call. I sent it over to you. Let me know what you think. Perfect. Nailed it. Um,
Wow.
But there's been plenty of times where, I will reach out to the musicians or, I'll interpolate, um, which I started picking up interpolation from really the West Coast producers, which you weren't seeing in really with the 90s East Coast hip hop production. If Eric Sermon is sampling George Clinton, he's sampling George Clinton. If you hear George Clinton on a Dr. Dre record, he's not sampling George Clinton. He has musicians replaying George Clinton. So I take a lot of that. I try to. I didn't get a chance to do that with Ceremony, and I could get to that later. Um, but I've tried to do that much more this year, working with the actual musicians, or if it's not the actual musicians, working with musicians in general to kind of beef up the music and create either new sounds or build upon the previous palette that they had laid down. The most recent song, the Blackistan remix that I did, Mechanical Movement, um, that is all that's all replayed. So that's all actual
Nice.
musicians. That's playing the bass, the guitars. I'm doing the keys. All that's replayed. So it's a very Chrome song, but at the same time, it's all live instruments, and that's one thing that I've started to move towards really in I would say the second half of my career, but really at this stage of my career, it's an evolution. I still will sample. I use sampling throughout my music, and I'll use it, moving forward. There's no
Yeah.
stopping that. It is who I am. But it's taking those samples and building upon it, uh, using that as the foundation, and then evolving from there. It's like, okay, here's our we use ambient samples, for example. I'll take something and kind of filter it and lay it throughout, and then build on top of that. So I have a song. It's a remix. It's 16 tons because we're talking about other genres. 16 tons is was originally a country song by an artist named Merle Travis. The song is from 1947. It's resung by many different singers, Johnny Cash, etc. Uh, Recently, it was redone by an artist named King Dude, who has it's an awesome name, who has a massive following right now. Redid the song, really taking so his original song was acoustic, and it was really just set to an acoustic guitar. He had some synthesizers throughout and some keys, but I took it and turned it into a very dark, almost gothic hip hop song. So there's a very distinct drum break that I used throughout. I brought Doug Wimbish back in because I love Doug Wimbish. And if I have a legend who's willing to continue to work with me, I'm going to keep
Mhm.
reaching out.
Right.
I also brought in a friend of mine, Daniel Fleming. He's he's in a hardcore band called Age of Ruin. Um, so I brought him in to do guitars during the hook, and kept King Dude's vocals throughout. But it's a very different. It's not what you would expect, but at the same time, it still works, and it's been immensely popular. On It's on Spotify. I mean, we just passed 50,000 streams in a week and a half or so. Um, but people love it, and it's not something that it's not that I'm doing something completely different. I'm doing exactly what I always do. I'm just
Mm.
working with someone different. So yes, it's a country folk singer over Chrome production, but it still works.
Yeah, I did hear the track earlier
Mhm.
this month. So
Yeah.
you explaining it, as you're explaining, I'm thinking of the song.
Mhm. Yeah, I wanted to. So I've been doing this. I like to do remixes outside of hip hop. I think it keeps me sharp, and it
Mm.
also helps kind of build upon what I've already laid as a foundation as a producer. I can expand into other genres, but not just completely change what I'm doing. One of the mistakes that I made early on as a producer, and this is when you're young, and you start working in other genres, you try to make music like other producers in that genre are doing. So if you jump into you know metal, for example, you're going to make something that sounds like every other metal producer. You're not going
Mm.
to make something that sounds like hip hop with metal elements, which is what I do now. I don't listen to. I usually, when I'm doing remixes, I usually don't listen to the original song. I usually
Mm.
lay my foundation first while listening to the acapella. I'll listen to the
Uh,
acapella, get a feel for the vibe, get a feel for the vocals, get a feel for the energy, and then lay the foundation. Then I'll listen to the original to see, some of the nuances that they have in the production that might be accentuating uh, certain elements of the vocals, maybe where the bridge comes in, things like that. Um, but I usually just kind of start fresh and kind of visualize how I want the song to be, and then build that track out from the acapella first.
that makes sense. Yeah, with a lot of artists, it's, whether you're a producer, you play a particular instrument, you DJ,
Hmm.
or you're an MC. If you, like you were saying, you didn't listen to it, so you tend to not listen to it because then it provides a certain influence
Right.
that you're not actually working towards doing that, but it ends up happening because you listen to it.
Naturally. I mean, you're naturally
Hmm.
going to be influenced by your environment, by what you're listening to, and sometimes it's subconsciously, sometimes it's
Hmm.
deliberate. And one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to deliberately sound like someone else in another genre. I don't want to, if I happen to do a pop song, I don't want it to sound like every other pop song. I want it to sound like something dirty, something dusty, something gritty in pop. So it's something you're not expecting, but it works, which is what I try to do. I try to take what I do as a producer best and bring that over and let it work in that space.
Gotcha. That now with your relationship with Mr. Wimbush,
Mhm.
um, how has that expanded to other musicians?
So, uh, a lot of people they say, "Oh, you've worked with Doug." I love Doug. I'd love to work with you as well. Um, I'm working on a song with Daru Jones, the drummer
Drummer.
for
Hmm.
Jack White, really, who's worked with Doug uh, many many times. They're actually in a separate band. Um, I don't know what it's called, but um, that's that came about because of working with Doug. There's been many musicians who have reached out because they, oh, I heard what you did with Doug. But it's not just Doug, but it's other musicians I've worked with as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I have Daru working on drums. He's actually on tour. He comes back, I think, end of September, he said, on a song for the new Spitslam album. Spitslam is Chuck D's label. That has, the song has Daddy O, Cool Kim, and Chill Rob G on it. And Daru's doing the drums, and Aaron Wills of 311, the band 311, is doing the bass and keys on that song. Um, so it's obviously it's an eclectic mix with some hip hop legends that putting together for the song.
Wow. There you go. That's nice. Yeah, cool. Shout out to Cool Kim. Being
Cool
that
Kim.
I'm born and raised in Staten Island, we
Right.
used to actually go to the same barbershop for a while.
Okay. Yeah, he's a good dude. I love Cool
Yeah.
Kim. I mean, we were supposed to link up a few months ago. He was down here in the area, but we had a snowstorm that day, and I couldn't get out. He couldn't get in, so we didn't get a chance to connect. But we'll make it happen one of these days.
Cool. Now let's go back a little bit to one of your early recordings,
Hmm.
Razcast.
Which one? Long Walk Home.
Yes.
Long Walk Home. That was 2005. So that came about. That was I really started to push outside of my local circle in 2004. I started really reaching out to other artists with my production to just see, what can happen. So let's see, 2004, I started reaching out to. I didn't reach out to Raz directly. What happened was I connected with J211. J211 was part of Raz's re-op, and
That's right.
really put
Yeah.
me in touch with. He said, "Hey, I love your production. Um, what do you think about me passing it over to Raz and have him get on the song with me, and we go from there." So I said, "All right, bet. Let's, of course, it's Razcast. Let's make this happen." So I got in with J211. He did the song "A Long Walk Home," um, which became my first really official single. That actually, what it there was actually a song that would have been before that, but it was never released. And I mentioned this on social media yesterday. Let me step back for a second. Uh, in 2004, Be Real had a contest on his website. He had like a bulletin board back in the day, and the winning producer, it was a beat contest. The winning producer would get a song on his mixtape at the time, the Gunslinger, and I think he did 3 Gunslingers. I could be wrong. Um, so they had the contest. I won. He's like, all right, bet you win. I'm gonna record to the beat. Um, so that would have been 2004. Um, I got like a preview of Be Real, like playing the beat and writing something to it, like something like an old school video back in the day. I don't have that anymore. Um, I got a free copy of the CD when it came out. It was signed by Be Real. I'm playing through it, and my song isn't on there. Never happened. I reached out. I said, hey, what happened? I thought the song was gonna be on there. They said, oh, something happened with the timing. We didn't get a chance to finish it. It'll be on the next one. All right. Next one comes out, wasn't on it. It's fine. So obviously that didn't happen. That would have been cool. But 2005, Long Walk Home was my first actual single that I released, my first actual song with an established artist, and that was Razcast and J211. And much love to J211. He's in a different place right now. Um, last I heard, I mean, I don't want to put his business out there, but last I heard, he's been recovering for many years from actually this is public, from a gunshot uh, wound to the head. Um,
Mm.
so uh, I did one other song with Raz. That it's an awful segue, but he's as far as I know, he's doing well. He's healthy. He's recovering.
It's good
But
to hear.
yeah, I did one other song with Razcast, and that would be "Hush Little Baby," which was the game disc
Right,
when
right.
which that blew up. I don't remember when that was, 2007, 2008, something like that. But I produced that for him as well. Obviously, that's much later. There were a lot of other songs and albums that preceded that. But that was the only other time that I worked with Raz after that. There was another song that we were supposed to do together with J211 and also Prodigy and 40 Glock, um, which was over a beat that later went to Ill Bill and Killer Priest. That was Awaiting the Hour. So it didn't, that song never happened. So I passed it to Ill Bill, and he said, "You know who I would want on this? I would want Killer Priest. Can you reach out to Killer Priest?" Because at the time, I was called by many in different circles a Wu affiliate based on all the different artists within the Wu community that I was working with and being part of Thug Angels. So he said, can you reach out to Priest? So I talked to Jay Ronan, who said, yeah, he's coming down, he'll record, make that happen, um, and push that song out. It's yeah, that's Awaiting the Hour, and that was over a Slayer sample, which at the time everyone hated because well, except Ill Bill, um, because you're fusing essentially heavy metal with hip hop, and that was at its, I wouldn't say it was at its infancy because it had popped up many times in the past. You had Public Enemy sampling Slayer with She Watched Channel Zero. You also had Kerry King of Slayer playing on Beastie Boys' No Sleep Till Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
I think it was No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Um, so you had elements of it throughout the years, but at that time, it wasn't really something that was happening. And for people who were traditionally boom bap, they kind of stepped away from it. Obviously, it's embraced more so now, but at the time, a lot of what I was doing, I was introducing a lot of metal, a lot of rock, a lot of different sample sources into a lot of my early production that you weren't typically hearing. My the, the first big song that I had, so we'll go back to 2006, was MF Grimm's Karma, also with Ill Bill and with Block McCloud. And Karma, I actually sampled the Beatles. I sampled the Beatles' Helter Skelter. And that's just what's running throughout. It's just that dun 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 dun. And it's a very heavy Beatles song, and I sampled that, and um, no one else was sampling really heavy, fuzzy guitars like that in their music. You just didn't hear that, and I was doing that with a lot of the different songs I was producing at the time, and even now, I sprinkle it in. Um, just because you're bringing in, as we talked about earlier, uh, those different genres that you were listening to growing up. Yeah, I listened to the Beatles. I listened to Slayer. I listened to these artists, and I'm bringing them into my production
Mhm.
for the hip hop audience, so that they can also be exposed to it. They can say, "Oh, what is that? What did he sample for that? Or
Yeah.
what is
Pique
he
that
using as
interest.
inspiration?" Right,
Mhm.
exactly. So I it's another way to expose just the fans to other artists, other musicians, other genres that they typically wouldn't be exposed to, which is the same way it would happen with jazz. And really, when you're listening to Tribe and you say, "Oh, what did they use for that?" You go back and you start listening to all these different artists. You start realizing, oh, okay, that's what Tribe sampled for, this song. That's dope. I really like this album. Um, so it's really helping to expose the fans to more music than they typically would be listening to subconsciously, really.
Yep. And you do that really well. was most producers, it's more of digging for different types of music, not necessarily this is what I listen to and enjoy,
Right.
and let me incorporate it into hip hop.
Right. It's I think for me, it's always I make music that I enjoy listening to. And I'm fortunate that so many people also enjoy listening to it. But at its core, I'll sit down and I'll make something based off of what I might have been listening to in the car. I might have been listening to Chick Corea, and I'll say, well, I'm going to pull something from Chick Corea, and I might have been listening to Dag Nasty, for example, or Pearl Jam, and work some of those elements in, and you don't realize it, and you start to dig and find out, oh, I remember this from another song. Okay, so he sampled Pearl Jam's Jeremy, for example. And it's really just an expansion of that musical palette for the listeners, really.
Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to ask was because you mentioned J211 earlier,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, with the Hush Little Baby production,
Hmm.
did he actually pass that off, not wanting to use that song and give it to Razkaz?
No, so Hush Little Baby was always for Raz. That
Okay.
was he. If I remember correctly, Jay reached out to me because Raz was going to the studio and needed some beats because he was
Mm.
gonna. He didn't say what specifically, so I didn't know that he was going in to record, the game disc. So I sent a batch of beats, and I heard it maybe a week later when everyone else did. When it went live, and you're hearing it on all the hip hop websites, and they're talking about it on MTV and all that. That's when I heard it, and I was like, oh, they used that beat. Um, and it worked, because he incorporated that into the diss, the Hush Little Baby, which what I
Mm.
sampled throughout. Um, and they also, like, I don't know who the engineer was on that, but they added additional keys that I actually didn't have on my
Oh,
song, um, which was, I think it came in every 4 or 8 bars. I can't remember, but I didn't have that in my production. But they added that to it, and so it just kind of it gave it more of a West Coast feel, just overall with the song. I mean, the song itself is, it's a very East Coast boom bap beat, but just adding those keys kind of brought it back over to the West a little bit.
gotcha, gotcha. Mm. You're also a big video game guy.
I am. I love video games. I have a arcade in my garage. I have about the actual, like, cabinets, the actual original
Nice.
cabinets from
Mm.
the 80s and 90s in my garage. I have about 9, I think I have, and I have
Ooh.
pretty much every single console that was made. I collect games. I collect a lot of different things. Um, it's just things that I'm interested in. Things that it's really. And it's the same thing with the Funko Pops. It's really kind of a nostalgic factor, which is also what I incorporate into my music. A lot of it is based on nostalgia. The games I collect, you go into my arcade, and there's Street Fighter 2, there's Mortal Kombat. There's games that I was playing when I was younger. Outrun and NBA Jams in there. Um,
Mhm.
the games that I collect, the consoles that I collect, are based on games that I played when I was younger, or games that I would have loved to have played when I was younger, but we couldn't afford it. So a lot of that is, now that I'm able to, I'm going to try to acquire these things and
Yeah.
just have them.
Enjoy that. Yeah.
Exactly. You're buying consoles that you could never afford when you were a kid. Your mom couldn't buy that. So these are things that I have now, and I can say, I can finally play, on the Neo Geo. It's crazy.
Man, you mentioned Neo Geo.
Yeah. I mean, no one could afford a
Look,
Neo Geo back in the day.
that's all I was gonna say.
Yeah,
That console right there, if you knew somebody that had that, they were rich.
yeah. I didn't know anyone who had a Neo Geo. That I mean, that wasn't no one had. I mean, like you would see the
No.
ads in video game magazines, and then you go and look and see how much it is. It was $800-900, I think, for the
Hmm.
console. The cartridges themselves were $200. The
Yeah,
cartridges are huge. They're actually
huge. Yeah,
they're
I
like
remember that.
VHS tapes. So and they're very expensive, but those games were amazing.
Yeah,
You know,
and then
you
and then they had the memory cards, which
mhm,
was innovative back then. That you could take that from home
right.
and put it in the arcade machines.
Yeah, there was a lot of crazy things that they were doing that none of the other consoles at the time, Super Nintendo, Genesis, which were the TurboGrafx 16, those consoles at the time, they just couldn't compete with that,
Yep.
which was fine because no one could afford a Neo Geo anyway.
Hmm.
So they're just doing their thing, and they would also be killing it in the arcade because you had Fatal Fury, you had Art of Fighting, you had all these games, these
Samurai
Neo
Showdown. Yep.
Samurai Showdown, exactly. You had all these Neo Geo specific games that they were a fighting game console that people are dumping their quarters in because you can't
Yep.
afford the console anyway, but you get that same experience in the arcade because it's the exact same thing. That
Yep.
those a lot of the times those were the actual cartridges that were in some of those machines
Into the strings. Yeah.
that were playing on those cabinets.
Yeah. Back in the days, I was reading a lot of video game magazines,
Mhm.
so find out all these little things that you talk about right now. It
Right,
it just blew my mind back then.
right. Yeah, I mean, I used to collect all this Game Pro, video game, and computer entertainment, Nintendo Power, all those. You would a lot of those. I didn't have a subscription to those, so you would go to the library and you would check out the magazines and then just never return
Yep.
them. So so you just like keep going back and just keep collecting them, or sometimes they would sell them and you'd pick them up. Um, but yeah, I was like like most kids in the 90s, most teenagers, I was heavily into video games. Still am. I wouldn't say heavily. I mean,
Mm.
I don't have a lot of
But still enjoy
opportunities.
it.
I still
Yeah.
enjoy it. I don't have a lot of opportunities to play the games like I used to, but I still enjoy it when I can.
Mm. Yeah. My oldest son, he plays Tecmo Bowl on the emulator.
Mm. I used to love Tecmo Bowl. We used to play as Bo Jackson and just like kill everybody, just go up, down, and just take off, and then you run, 95 yards, and no one's touching Bo. Um, but yeah, and my son he loves video games. He's the one he's just like me. He's always playing video games, and uh, he isn't going to be playing some of the older games on emulators just because the graphics are old and they're not really into that. Um, but occasionally I could get him to play like an old Super Nintendo game or old Genesis game, and
Yeah, yeah.
he might enjoy it for a little bit and then decide to go back to Pokemon. Um, it's fine.
Yeah. They get the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah. A funny moment with Tecmo Bowl, my son is he's gotten pretty good at it.
Mm,
So he played the Vikings and he was complaining about the defense. And I
mm.
said, "Purple people eaters." He's
Right,
like,
right,
"What is
right,
that?"
right.
I said, "Go look it up."
Yeah, they were a monster. That was that when Warren Moon was quarterback for the Vikings? Was that around that time?
No, it wasn't Warren at that time
No, okay.
because he was with the Oilers.
That's right. Warren Moon was with the Oilers at the time. That's right. You're right.
And what was their running back? Lorenzo White.
That's right. Yeah. Way back when.
Hmm. Now you're also into comics.
Yes. So I actually started out as a comic book artist. So that was what I had always wanted to do uh, ever since I was a kid. I always wanted to be, a comic book artist. So, I was drawing things here and there, and I got accepted into the Joe Kubert School of Art, which
Ooh, very nice.
that was 1998. So I got accepted, but it didn't work out. We just simply we couldn't
Mhm.
afford it. So I had to shift gears and change my career and got into graphic design and web design, which became a big deal when I got into it because that was when the web was really starting to blow up. So being able to create websites around that time, you became a really hot commodity. Um, but anyway, but yeah, I started out as a comic book artist. Um, it didn't pan out, but I've always loved comics. I've always same thing with video. When you're a kid in the 80s and 90s, it's comic books, it's video games, occasionally skateboarding. Um, a lot of that, I'm still into now. I don't do a lot of collecting. I don't do the same amount of collecting. It's usually very specific, and if I do acquire something, it's probably something that's been graded, a CGC grade, and it's
CGC, yeah.
it's something that's of value. Um, but I'm not. I don't go to comic book stores now and pick up the latest issue. I couldn't tell you what's going on in any Marvel comic or DC or Image or anything like that. Really, it's just a lot of it's the same thing that I said about video games, for example. It's nostalgic. So what I acquire would be for nostalgic reasons. So if I buy Black Panther #1, that's a 9.8 CGC, it's because I want to have Black Panther #1. Uh, so that's where I am as a comic book collector. If I see things here and there, I'll pick it up. Um, but most of it isn't. I'm not buying new comics. I'm buying older comics that
Yeah.
I used to have or that I always wanted and didn't get a chance to get, and I'll pick it up now. So a lot of the old Image comics in the early '90s that they started blowing up and you couldn't afford them as a kid because the comic that it was a rare run, all of a sudden it's $200 $300 in a comic book store.
Yeah.
Now it's like $50. So okay, I'm gonna buy it now because I couldn't afford it then. So it's really it's the same thing. It's nostalgic. It's acquiring a lot of these collectibles for nostalgic reasons,
Yeah.
and just to have and say, I finally have, this issue, and I finally have, this final comic that I could never get when I was younger. So that's where I am as a collector.
That's great. Yeah, I saw that you had that Captain Marvel
Mm.
issue. So
The old Jim Starlin cover.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, I have quite a few Captain Marvels somewhere around.
nice.
I don't think they're here. They'd be
Mhm.
downstairs somewhere. But yeah, I have quite a few. I I love the comics from the '70s and '80s. I never got into a lot of the '60s issues just because obviously they weren't as prevalent when I was younger. But the '70s comics were still hanging around. The '80s comics obviously were. So a lot of what I've acquired since are comics in the '70s, '80s, '90s when I was really reading a lot of those books, and that's what I have now, all bagged and boarded and in
So
the protective protective cases.
yeah, yeah, great. And when I saw that, I said I got to show him just to let him know. But
Hmm.
they restarted this last month.
Mm.
You see
Oh
that? And
man, that's I know I might have to check it out. See, I will check out. I will check out books based on recommendations. So if someone
mhm,
says, "Hey, you need to check out, you know, this run of X-Men, or you need to check out this run of Sandman," then I'll say, "Okay, let me check it out." I do the same thing. If I'm watching anime or reading manga, a lot of that I'll
mhm,
base off of recommendations. If someone says you should check this out, I'm like, okay, let me go check that out and see what it's about. Just because I don't at this point, it's not like when I was younger, where you're exposed to that community where you're exposed to all those books that are coming out. I have so much going on right now. I just don't have the time. So if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, you check out the new Captain Marvel," okay, let me go check that out and see if it's good. So it's a lot of it's just recommendations these days.
Cool. Yeah. And to segue to that with recommendations, when it comes to manga, I would say if you get the chance, check out Vagabond.
Vagabond, I'll have to check it out. I've seen it, but I don't have it. I have this up here. This is all manga right here. There's the whole Akira. All of the Akiras are down there, just because those are the originals. So they're bagged and boarded. The actual original from the Japanese manga.
Nice.
The full. I also have the full run. But yeah, I'll have to check that out. Vagabonds. I mean, I've heard of it. I just don't have it. Actually, I don't think I have it. I might. I'll have to look.
Cool. And before we get into you coming back into the music with your new album, Ceremony of Innocence, let's talk about getting bombarded with recommendations for anime. What did you pick?
What did I get? I got I think Dune's Megalopolis was the most recent one that I was asked to check out. I got a bunch, but Dune Megalopolis is actually an older one. I believe that was from the early '90s.
Yeah.
I had so it was a 4-part series, and if I remember correctly, I had episode 2, and I got that from Blockbuster Video on VHS. And I remember watching it, but I was never able to see the other episodes. So it was just kind of you watch it a few times and it just didn't make a lot of sense. So that's one that I'll probably go back and revisit. But for me, I have a lot of anime in my collection, but I usually just defer to, as I was saying, Akira, just because it wasn't the first anime that I was exposed to. I believe that would have been the Robotech movie. It's either Robotech or Macross, but it's definitely my favorite. And so it's one of those that you just always go back to. But yeah, whenever I get new recommendations, I'll check them out. But there's probably 50, 60, 70 in my backlog of anime that I still haven't seen. I mean, there's so many movies I don't have time to watch.
That's great. Yeah, my father is not an anime fan, so to say. He enjoys animated films and stuff like that.
Right.
But he indirectly put me onto my first anime in Gigantor.
Gigantor, right. Yeah, I didn't see Gigantor until they did the replays. I don't remember I don't think it was the Sci-Fi Channel. I don't remember what they replayed Gigantor on, but I remember seeing the older episodes of Gigantor and Astro Boy around that time.
Yeah.
And something else around that same time period. But a lot of the anime I started watching was when Sci-Fi Channel started to have that block in the early '90s.
Yeah.
So that's
on the weekends.
Right. So it was that's when you start seeing Ninja Scroll, Vampire Hunter D, Ranma 1/2. You start seeing Dominion Tank Police. You start seeing a lot of the anime that you never were exposed to because you're not finding these in Blockbuster or Suncoast Video. And Sci-Fi is pumping these out, and you're like, oh, this is crazy. What are we watching here? This is much different than you're watching Ninja Turtles, and then it goes into Rescue Rangers. This is completely different. This is crazy. There's people chopping people's heads off, and there's blood everywhere, and things are blowing up, and there's giant robots. Like this is crazy. So that was when I was really exposed to anime. It was the Sci-Fi Channel, just because they were playing, um, anime that you just wouldn't have seen anywhere else. I mean, I didn't have, in this area, the DC area, we didn't have, bootleg shops where you can go and cop like a VHS tape of, imported, anime. Like that wasn't a thing. So you're just relying on, what's being played on TV. And so a lot of it, I'm not going to say that, I was younger, I'm watching, these exclusive, animes that no one else was watching. I'm watching what everyone else is watching, um, just because for a lot of us, it's the first time we're seeing it.
Hmm. Yeah, it was a great time, man.
Hmm.
Get that exposure like that
Right.
because um, living in New York City, most of the anime that I got exposed to later on, like my early teens,
Hmm.
was me and my friends going to Chinatown.
Right. Right.
And when we went there, we also went to the little underground arcade spot over there on
Hmm.
Mott Street. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it didn't start to like the anime scene really didn't start blowing up in this area until the late '90s. Then you start seeing it popping up. It didn't, if you jump to Chinatown up in DC, then you start seeing some of the spots have that. Not just Chinatown. Some of you start getting kiosks in the mall. You start
Oh
having, one
wow.
or two people, all of a sudden they have these crazy imports, and they came, directly from overseas, and you're buying some of those. So, 98, 99, you're buying, some crazy bootleg uh, DVD that, if you're lucky, it's translated or dubbed. Most of the time, it wasn't, so you have no idea what they're saying. But it's still, this crazy animation that you're watching, and it wasn't just the anime, but it was also a lot of the martial arts films that were coming
Yeah.
out of Asia in the late '90s as well. You're starting to get those before anyone else is. Black Mask, for example.
Yep.
Um,
Jet Li,
right,
Donnie Yen,
right,
Once Upon a Time in China.
right, exactly. When Black Mask came out over here, they redubbed it and they had
Hmm.
the hip hop soundtrack. I forget who was on it. I think there was a Noriega song on that. I remember, or Half a Mil, something. Um, but oh, the Firewater song was on Black Mask with David
Oh,
Banner.
that's right.
Um, so when that came out, I had already seen it a year before, and everybody's like, "Oh, have you seen Black Mask? It's crazy. This dude Jet Li is in it." I was like, I already saw that. I've seen that. I already know who Jet Li is. I already know who Donnie Yen is. I already know who all these people are because you're copying these bootleg DVDs before anyone else is.
Yep.
And but that's just because you're trying to find more, uh, really more of this media that you're not typically exposed to, and just trying to consume it, finding whatever you can find.
Yep. It's amazing. Now, tell us what brought you back to making your own project. Because
Right.
before your album dropped, you did the Dynasty of Dominic Devereaux with
Mm.
Indigo Phoenix.
Shout out to
Um,
Indigo.
you also had an EP, The Cursed Earth, that came out,
Mm.
and you had some other work in between that time as well.
A lot
Past
actually.
uh,
Yeah.
like the past what 2 years? I've seen a lot of your name a lot more in the past 2 years.
Mhm, mhm. So I'll step back. So I stepped away in about 2013, 2014 or so. You know, when you have a growing family, I have four kids. When you have a growing family, when you have a job, that in itself is, there's a lot to juggle, and it's important to make sure that you are really devoting enough time to your family first, and also your job, because if you're not performing well at your job, then you're not getting paid, and everyone, that becomes difficult for everyone. uh, But because of that, because I had so many different responsibilities, the music industry started to become much more problematic for me. It didn't become, it wasn't enjoyable, not just because I had a lot going on outside of it, but there was just a lot that was happening that it just sucked a lot of the joy for me out of it. There was a lot of drama. There were people that I was close to dying. Um, it just got to a point where I wasn't really feeling, um, like I was creating, actual quality work, or that I was putting 100% into what I was doing. I kind of felt like I was just making the music and going to the next one. I didn't have the same passion that I had for it when I started out, um, you know 10, 20 years prior to that. So I stepped away. I just it was like, it's cool. I'm going to spend more time with my family and just step away. And that was about 2013. Throughout the years, I would occasionally, I would still produce. I would make a few things here or there, pass it off to someone, pass something else. Um, and it wasn't until, so I had, I'll preface this before I get to the pandemic by saying in 2019, I, um, I passed a few beats to Breeze Overflowing. I passed a batch of beats that I had, I had in the past. They were, beats that spanned a few years. I passed it to Breeze, and we had always talked about doing a project, but never got a chance to really get anything going. I produced a lot of songs with Breeze, but we never actually sat down and did a project. Then the pandemic happened. And um, all of a sudden we have a lot of free time. So Breeze and I started working on the project, and you know, okay, well now I'm back into now I'm back into music. The pandemic was different because we were locked down. I'm here with the family. We're spending more time together. Um, but I realized that what was important to me when I came back, and I prefaced all of this by saying, my family is first. And whatever I do, I need to make sure that my family gets all of my time when it's available. And I work music in those pockets when, I have, free time, whether it's in the evenings or, when my youngest is napping. I work music into those times. And during the pandemic, when Breeze and I pushed out the album, Old Man Spring, I did a lot of that. I did, he actually did the mixing. I passed off the production, the stems and everything. I did a lot of that around family time, which is what I do now. So I'll continue into that. But I realized that I could make this work, and I came back with a renewed sense of passion for the industry because there was so much that I didn't accomplish, what now, almost 10 years ago, that I wanted to accomplish now. That, there were artists that I wanted to work with, there were bands that I wanted to work with, there were genres that I wanted to carry over into that I didn't when I stepped away. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this now, but I'm going to do it, my way. I'm not going to get completely sucked in. I'm going to make sure that I give myself enough time to create the music without burning myself out, without just completely immersing myself in the music and draining myself completely. Making sure that I had that balance of family and creativity. So I came back. 2020, we dropped the EP with Breeze and I. I also remixed a Shogun Assassin album, Shogun Assassin of Killer Army. I remixed that. That was available on vinyl and CD. I think they're all sold out now. Um, but that's when around that time, that's when I start coming back in. I, I wasn't on social media for any of this, so um, I didn't have anything. All that time that I was away until I came back in 2020. I didn't have an Instagram account. I didn't have Twitter. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have anything like that. So if anyone wanted to reach me, you had to have had my email address or my phone number from the past and reach out to me that way, because there was no way you were going to get in touch with Chrome prior to, I think, June 2020, something like that. So once I started setting everything back up and started putting old music back onto the streaming platforms, just so I can get my name back up again, uh, Ryan of Man Bites Dog reached out to me on Instagram and asked if I was interested in dusting off the equipment and making music again. And I said, sure, I can, let's work on an album. So I started the foundation for that in 2020. Most of the production was production that I had either done in 2019 or early 2020, and I handed that off to Ryan to kind of distribute to some artists that were connected to the label. So the first vocals that came back were from Sleep Sinatra. So Sleep did Cursed Earth first, and then he said his verse for what became Lichens. And then I got a few other verses, and as I'm putting it together, I say, you know what? At the same time, I need to start reconnecting with all of the artists that I had previously worked with in the past, as well as start establishing some new relationships. So we started with Cursed Earth. Cursed Earth was the first song that I started building around. So with Cursed Earth, I already had Sleep's verse, and so I reached out to Chino. I had worked with Chino in the past, and he said, I got you. What do you need? I told him, I need you on the hook. At the same time, I wanted to think of who would fit well with this production, this sound. And I said, well, let me reach out to Gore-Tex, who's now Lord Goat of nonfiction. And he dropped his verse. So one thing that I do, and this is one thing that I've done, going back, 15, 16, 17 years, is I like to pair different types of artists, different types of MCs on the song to create matchups that you wouldn't typically think of over my production, and watch the two of them or three of them or 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 coexist within the track. So you listen to on paper, you see some of these these songs, and Chris Rivers, Pun's son, Bobby J from Rockaway, and then you have Kwame, the legend himself. Like, how is this going to work? It works. You as a producer, and this is what oftentimes separates beat makers from producers. As a producer, you're thinking about the song as a whole. I'm not just thinking about the beat itself. I'm not just thinking about, okay, I finished the beat, I'm going to pass it to an MC, they're going to do their thing, and then that's cool, my name is going to be out. I'm thinking, okay, I have the production here. Who would sound right on this? How else can I expand upon the universe that I've created here and make this a living, breathing entity of a song? What other can I bring in? Other instruments? Can I bring in other artists? How can I build on this and make this more than just a beat and vocals? How can I make this an actual full-fledged song? And so you're thinking about all these different matchups, and Ceremony. What I wanted to do, it's what I am at its core. I'm an old school producer. I've been doing this since 1997. So a lot of the artists that I've worked with, or the artists that I reach out to, are artists that I've always been listening to, that I've listened to, since 80s, 90s, 2000s. And I bring those into the fold, but at the same time, I also try to marry them with newer artists who I think would also sound well on a song. So while I wasn't, here's the funny thing about Sleep Sinatra. He had actually reached out to me in 2010, trying to get production from me. We didn't get a chance to connect then, but we did connect, for the Ceremony album. But there's a lot of the production there was really done. Some of it was created. Some of the newer production, Charles Oakley, for example, was created new uh, for Reza. So, shout out to Hellraiser. I won't get
We work
into
with him a lot.
yeah that. I'll step back for a second. Hellraiser gave me a lot of opportunities. He gave me a chance. I actually got my first uh, check from a record label from Razor from producing Renaissance Child, producing on Renaissance Child. So producing Nativity, the intro with Killer Priest and Lost Ark. I got a check from Nature Sounds from that, and that was the first check that I had ever received. I think it was 2006, I think.
Nice.
But I owe a lot to Razor, and I always say that. That's my brother right there. Um, so we had the verse. The verse that I used for Charles Oakley was actually a Thug Angel song that we had done. Thug Angels was raising Shabazz the Disciple before they're falling out. Um, so I had the verse that was never used, was unreleased, um, and I said, well, I want to use it for Ceremony of Innocence. And told Razor, he was cool with that. But I said, well, who else can I put on this? So I said, well, let me reach out to Shaheem. I've worked with Shaheem before. And I said, let me go back to my Woo affiliate roots and just make this a pure Woo joint. So I got Shaheem on the hook and got Maya Lansky of Woo Syndicate, also a VA Woo group. So I got Maya Lansky on there. So you have this Woo Fam song that that's that's a part of my history that I put on this album. I have this Woo Fam song. Same thing with DMV. DMV, I'm from the DMV, so I had MCs from the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia on the song. So that's how it plays out in order. DC, you have Raheem Supreme. Maryland, you have Snook the Crook. Virginia, you have Bless Picasso. Throughout, there's congas by Go-Go Bouncy of Proper Utensils. So if you're not from the DC area, go-go music doesn't mean anything to you. You don't know what that is. But if you're from the area, you know you love and appreciate go-go. So I had to bring that in. So I mentioned this earlier about bringing in other elements into my music. You have go-go mixed in with dark boom bap, and it's a seamless integration. I had this vision. I wanted this to be a DC song, um, without forcing it. I wanted to have it all play nicely. So you have this very dark production. You have all the verses going, but you listen and there's congas playing throughout, and that's Go-Go Bouncy playing the actual congas. And shout out to Go-Go Bouncy. Shout out to Little Mickey who recorded him. Um, so it a lot of the songs that I did, and I've said this many times. There's nostalgic elements in not just the songs I've created, but also the work that I do. I bring a lot of those elements in. So a lot of the MCs that I work with, a lot of the songs I create, some of the vibes that I develop with the production are rooted in a lot of nostalgia.
You are a true maestro.
Thank you, thank you. I I just I have a lot of times I could visualize how the sounds will be before I create it. So I sometimes have ideas for an MC. I have ideas for a singer. I already have these in my head before I've already started that production, and then I start to lay the foundation and go with it. I think it's important as a producer to be able to have that level of forward thinking when it comes to crafting a song. So it's not just sitting down at a drum machine and just tapping out the drums and chopping up your samples, and just you're making a beat that it's just a beat. For me, I especially now I'm thinking about who is going to fit onto this next song that I'm starting to create before I start to create it. So I'm always thinking about the next person that I'm transitioning to, the next project. If Indigo, Phoenix and I, because you mentioned Indigo, we're getting ready to uh, start the second half of the Dominique Devereaux project. Um, you know, I sat down knowing that we need production for that, and I know that there's a specific vibe that we need. So when I'm creating that, it's specific to, you know, Indigo. It's this is a song that's just for her. Pass it off. If I'm creating a song for someone else, this is a vibe that I have just for them. Create it, pass it off. Because a lot of what I do now, because I mentioned the time that I have with production. Um, I don't have a lot of time to work on music, which is kind of crazy when you think about how much I've released over the last this year alone. I've released actually in August alone. I think I released 7 releases. Um, I think there was an EP, the full length, 2 EPs, the full length album, and what's my math? 3 or 4 singles, something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Was it
so
Pavo or Pavo?
So what? Oh
Am I
yeah,
pronouncing?
right. We just released "Evidence of a Struggle" that came out last Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
That was a 3-track EP. What other EP did I release this month? I don't know. There's a lot of music that I release, um, but I don't have a lot of time to work on it. So I usually have maybe 2 hours a day to work on the music. So what's been important for me is to be smart and organized with the production and with the moves that I'm making. Um, so what I do is, I separate it by crafting the production and then mixing and mastering because I do a lot of mixing and mastering on my own. Um, so I separate it to make sure that I have enough time to tackle these projects and then move on to the next one. And if I don't accomplish what I need to within that given time that I've set aside, I get back to it the next day. If I didn't do it today, come back Thursday. Because I'm not trying to get completely sucked into the music and have it just completely take over my life,
Right.
which for a lot of people it happens, and then it starts to, like I said earlier, it sucks the joy out of you because it becomes a job. You become a machine just churning out the work, and it drains you. And it's important to maintain your mental health. So for me, it's been you know, being smart about how I work on the music, and it's worked for me. Obviously, it wouldn't necessarily work for a lot of other producers or beat makers, but when you've been doing it for as long as I have, you have you have shortcuts that you take, not shortcuts in terms of the production or the work that you're doing, but shortcuts to get to the stage that you need to um, more quickly, just because I know how to do this. I've done this a million times. I know what it takes to lay the foundation for a song. I can make a beat in 2-3 minutes and have that foundation, send it off. If this vibe works, then we build on that. But that comes from doing this since 1997, really. Um,
So efficiency. That's,
exactly.
mm-hmm.
So I try to be as efficient as possible with the time that I have.
And I gotta say, with your efficient work ethic and Indigo Phoenix's work ethic, it's a perfect match.
So we did that. So we did the 5-song EP, the first one, the Dynasty of Dominique Devereaux, in I want to say it was 4 days. So she did all of her vocals overnight. And then the rest of the time was just me mixing and getting everything right and getting all of that put together. And then we finished it. So it was probably about 4 days, if I'm not mistaken, that it took for that project from start to finish. Because she had an idea. She started sending me the Dynasty samples, and I had watched Dynasty back in the '80s. My aunt, and like, oh, I remember that. So I know the vibe that you have here. So okay, let me throw you some things that I think might work. So I sent them over, and she was like, this is perfect. And she's not sleeping, writing, and recording overnight. She sends it to me. I'm like, we're done. You did all the songs. Like, yeah. Uh, so we put it together, and yeah, it was done. 4 days, and then a few weeks after that, I did an EP with Impulse, also out of VA. That also took about 4 or 5 days because he wanted to get a project out at a specific time, a specific date, and we were kind of running into crunch time. So we put together some of the songs, but to fill the gaps, I reached out to a bunch of different MCs, Bless Picasso again, Sage Infinite, some of the local MCs here, Jack the General, Mental to God, um, Makaba, he's not local, to kind of fill in those gaps, and we put that together, and I think I want to say it was 5 days because the fifth day was cleanup. But there's these quick turnaround projects, and again, people say you're probably staying up all night doing all this. I worked it into the 2 hours a day that I have for all these projects. I said, okay, I have Indigo's vocals. Let me let me break down the production to the stems. Let's bring it into Pro Tools. Let's start getting all the mixes in place. That sounds crystal. You lay your template for the vocals. You bring that over to the next one, and you keep building. So you have your time. You listen to it. Sounds good. Pass it off. That sounds good. Listen to the mix and your monitors, your headphones. Listen to it in the car. That song's done. It's the same thing with all these other songs. Take care of the mix. Listen to the mix. When I'm driving to go get the kids or driving to take the kids to their activities. You're listening to the mix. You're hearing little things. Okay, well, let me come back and I'll take care of that when everyone's going to bed. That hour that I have right there, you make your little tweaks. I have my notes. I need to increase Indigo's vocals, or I need to increase, Chino's vocals, or whomever. Uh, you know, you have your vocals, and you try to be not your vocals. You have your notes, and you try to be as efficient as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, you definitely make use of the proper time.
I
Yeah,
try.
yeah. I do since I commute most of the time. That's where I do a lot of things.
Right,
Got things on my mind. I write it down. You know, Scheduling, networking with people. Try my best to use that time.
right. Exactly. I mean, when you have that time, when you have those opportunities, you have to maximize it. Especially, as you get older, it becomes more important to really take advantage of those pockets of time that you have. And so that's where I am, really maximizing these times.
So, and we cannot forget one of the other important parts of the album, and that is the engineering. So shout out Count Fifth,
Shout out to Count
also
Fifth.
from VA.
Hmm. Yeah, Count Fifth did all the mixing and mastering, not just for Ceremony of Innocence, but also the Cursed Earth EP, which preceded um, Ceremony of Innocence. Cursed Earth, because we had a delay with the production of the vinyl and the CDs. I wanted to fill that gap. So we already had released Hell or High Water as a single. We released that back in November. So I said, well, let's do a quick EP to fill the gap. So I did. I wanted Cursed Earth. I actually wanted Cursed Earth to be the lead single. So I led with Cursed Earth as the EP. Hold on, I have a copy of it because I don't remember all the songs on it. I did a remix of Trials and Tribulations, which is with Guilty Simpson, Ty Ferris, and Huss Kingpin. I remixed that specifically for the EP. I also there's a song Pollock. So Pollock had Kali and Jack the General on there, and I needed a third verse, and I was trying to figure out who I wanted to go on this, and um, one of the DJs had played one of my songs on one of their mixes, uh, and I was listening to it, and then right after my song, an Indigo Phoenix song came on, and I said, "Oh, you know what? She's dope. Let me try to reach out to her." So as I'm reaching out to her, Kali's sending me a message. She said, "You know who you should reach out to? Indigo Phoenix." I said,
Wow.
I actually already reached out to her. It was like an hour after I had reached out to her.
Like mines.
So I reached out to her and I said, "I'd love to have you on the song." And she said, "Yeah, I got you." So that was actually the first time we connected. Um, and she killed the verse. The song is crazy, but Indigo's verse is crazy. I also did what else was on that? Truth Spitter, which has Faux Eyes, formerly of Disturbing the Peace. Um, DJ Bizarro of Dysfunctional Family, and Copyright's also on that. Um, and then the last one is with Finsta Bundy,
Yeah.
and that was so a lot of the again a lot of the artists that I work with are artists that I've always wanted to work with, or artists that I was listening to in the '90s and 2000s. So you know a, n- a new listener, Finsta Bundy doesn't mean anything to them, but if you came up listening to '90s hip hop,
Underground. Yep.
Finsta Bundy, Dysfunctional Family, a lot of these artists that I pull together, and they're like, oh, they're dope. Let me look into them, and that goes back to what I was saying with the production. Bringing in other genres to expose the listener to these different artists and musicians that they typically wouldn't be listening to. I also try to do the same thing with the artists that I work with. I try to bring in artists that the fan base typically wouldn't be exposed to, or wouldn't dig into, or wouldn't listen to. But I love the work that they've done. Love the work that they continue to do, and I want everyone else to hear it as well. So that's why I create some of these matchups, because I think this person would sound good with this person.
I hope those that producers that are listening get some good insight on how you orchestrate artists on tracks. This is definitely important.
Uh, no, the one thing, it's important to establish those. It's not just important to establish those relationships, but it's important to try to seek out other artists and try to listen to as much as possible when you can, so that you can have these different MCs on your production, and see how that sound carries out into either their fan base, or establish a new fan base. It's really important to really step out of your, I wouldn't say comfort zone, because it's not necessarily a comfort zone, but it's really important to step out of uh, really the area that you're creating within. So a lot of kids now, they want everything to sound like Griselda. So I want MCs who sound like West Side Gun, to sound like Conway, to sound like Benny. Um, but maybe XMC would sound you know just as good over the production, or this MC from West Coast would sound just as good. So it's
Right.
important to kind of expand your listening, as a producer, so that you can reach out to these different artists. And that's one thing I did really when I was starting out. So when we started getting into like the early 2000s, um, I realized that it was going to be extremely difficult for me to just kind of stay within the DC area and try to work with a lot of these artists, because a lot of the sound at that time was veering over. This was really when, because you have to remember that DC, Maryland, Virginia, were kind of in this. this weird middle area in terms of sound. So a lot of the music from the South was really prevalent in the DMV. So especially around that time, a lot of what people are playing, it's Juvenile, it's BG. Um, it's not what's being played in New York, which is what
Right.
I was listening to. You also had a lot of what was coming out of the Midwest also coming over into the DMV as well. So the sounds that I was creating, the sounds that I grew up, you know, playing and enjoying, which was the mid '90s boom bap, which is when I started producing. A lot of the artists in this area weren't that wasn't their vibe. So it was important for me to say, okay, well, I can't really do a lot right now with this scene, so I'm going to expand my reach, and I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to have beat CDs and give it to different people. I'm going to reach out to DJs. I'm going to reach out to artists, managers, and see what comes of that. And my first, it wasn't my first big break because it didn't turn into a big break. But one of the first people that I really connected with was DJ City Rich. City Rich was Jizz's DJ. He later was Ari the Rugged Man's DJ. But through Rich, I met Jizza, and I gave him one of my beat CDs. I also met Sean Price and Buckshot at the same time, and Rich and I drove around DC with Dreddy Kruger of Royal Fam,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
who was was also he was I had just missed the window for the Wu Tang meets indie project because
Uh,
I had met Dreddy as that was wrapping up, so I didn't get a chance to get on that one. And he said, "I'll get you on the next one," but it didn't happen. Um, that heavily featured Bronze Nazareth, if I remember correctly. Um, so again, that was it was important for me to go back to the point of this. It was important for me to reach out to as many people as possible, and that's what I do now. I try to reach out to, or they reach out to me. Now it's more people reaching out to me, but I try to reach out to as many people as possible, just because I might hear something. I might listen to rap is out of control. Eclipse is playing something, and I'll hear an MC, or I'll hear a group and I'll say, oh, they it would sound really nice on something I'm working on, and I reach out to them. So again, when you have those opportunities to listen to other artists, to listen to other groups, it's important to really take those opportunities and um, try to bring those MCs onto your production as a producer, just because that helps to build your sound and also help expand your reach. Because as producers, we essentially live and die by the artists that we are connected with and that we work with. If you start out and you don't have the opportunity to work with an artist above a certain level, it's very difficult for you to gain any type of traction in this industry, especially now when it's incredibly saturated. I was fortunate to get in when I started, because now I'm old, and people know me. Um, but for new MC, it's much not a new producer. It's much more difficult, and you really have to go hard. You really have to
yeah.
reach out to as many people as possible to get your music out to as many people as possible.
Yeah. Build that resume.
Exactly. I have a long discography, but that comes from a lot of just reaching out. You have to be persistent. You have to be aggressive at times to get in touch with some of the artists that you really want to connect with. And for some of them, honestly, you also have to make sure you have the resources to be able to work with some of these artists, because some of them will do it for love and some of them won't. And you have to be prepared for that.
Absolutely. Both of knowledge and experience being spoken today. Definitely. Quickly, I would like to give a shout out to the people in the comment section that have been tuning in since the beginning. Kevin Bogan, peace,
Much love.
peace.
Peace, peace.
Indigo Phoenix,
Salute. I love Indigo Phoenix. I wait. I think I owe her something. I might owe her. Oh no, I already sent her the beat, so we're good. We're good.
okay, cool, cool.
Cover
And Cover
Boy.
Boy,
Yeah, he just dropped an instrumental. He's been dropping them like crazy, but he has done quite a bit of work with Killer Priest. I forget the name of the project that Priest dropped, but Cover Boy did a fair amount of production on that, if not all of it. I think he did most of it actually. But shout out to Cover Boy.
and it's always good to see people that you work with and know supporting during the interview like that.
Yep. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate them tuning in. I try to support as many people as possible. Even if I say this all the time, I might not have anything to do with a project, and that doesn't matter to me. If you've released something, I'll support it. I might not even really know you, but if I see something or hear something that I think is dope, then I'll support it. I think a lot of times within this industry, specifically MCs and producers, they treat it as competition. I'm not going to. I am old, but a lot of artists and producers, they treat it as competition. I'm not going to give this other producer that opportunity because I'm trying to keep all this to myself. I'm not trying to have them eat off my plate. And that's a mistake. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of artists to work with. There are thousands of opportunities out there, and there's no reason why you can't help someone else get another opportunity or help them get their name out. Um, because at the end of the day, everyone is trying to survive. Everyone is trying to build their name, build their discography, and if I can help, uh, with my platform that I've established, then I'll do that. I'm. It's more important to me that I give other individuals the opportunity to grow and to reach the level that I'm at now, than it is for me to continue to reach higher levels. I want someone else to take off. I want someone else to get those placements.
Absolutely. Shortly before we go, I have two other things to speak about,
Hmm.
and I find this important as you do, and that is giving back
Hmm.
through charity.
Hmm. So I started. I really started giving back to donating to charity in, I want to say it was 2006 or 2007. Um, and this actually started with MC Search. Shout out to MC Search. We have a single dropping in a few weeks, maybe a few months. Um, I reached out to Search because I wanted to get him on a song. He said, "Okay, that's cool. I just need you to donate to a charity. It was Rock and Wrap It Up. Rock and Wrap It Up, I believe, they provide clothing and food to the homeless in the New York area. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what the charity is. He didn't ask for the money; wasn't for him. The money was only for the charity. So I said, "Wow." No one had ever done that. No one had ever said, "I don't need the money. I want you to take the money that you were going to give me and give it to individuals who need it more than I do." And that stuck with me, because, and I'll be honest, prior to that, that wasn't anything I would have thought of. I've done charity work outside of it, but I never brought any of those elements into the music industry. I never really thought about how I can use what I was doing as a producer or as an artist to give back to the community. It was really, I give to the community outside of music, and then music is separate. I didn't marry those until really search, connecting with search. So with a few of the projects that I released, in the late 2000s, I was donating to Bright Beginnings. Bright Beginnings, they're in the DC area. I believe it's been many years, but I want to say they provide services for homeless women and children in the DC area. So I took the break. When I came back, I again wanted to continue my work with charities, but I wanted to kind of ramp it up and make it much more prominent. Because what I was doing in the past is it was sort of subtle the work that I was doing, which was benefiting the organizations. Well, it was only benefiting the organizations through the donation, but it wasn't giving them any additional spotlight or any additional recognition. And that was one thing I wanted to do in 2.0. 2.0 is, when I came back into the music industry, and really focus on some of the charities that I felt that I connected with and that I felt were really doing really awesome things. So for uh, this year specifically, I do a lot of work for Punks for Autism. Punks for Autism is a nonprofit or a 501c3 that creates a lot of primarily t-shirts, hats. It's merchandise with 100% of those sales. So you buy one of those shirts, you buy one of their hats. There's the hat right there. You buy one of their products, 100% goes back to local and nonprofit, local and national autism-related charities. So, 100%, it goes to them. So I've been supporting them. I love the work that they do. I love the shirts that they have. I wore one of their shirts 2 weeks ago when I was in Far Rockaway shooting the video with Search and Bobby J from Rockaway. Um, but I love the work they do. I think that it's a great cause, uh, and if I can elevate their name, I can bring more attention to the work that they're doing for the autism community, then I will do that. I also have been donating to the Better Day Foundation, Best Day Foundation. I'm sorry, Best Day Foundation. What they do is they provide adventure related activities for um, individuals with special needs, primarily older children, teens, and young adults. Um, so I try to do what I can to with the projects that I do. And I didn't mention this, but most of the projects that I've done, I've given 100% back to these charities. I haven't taken any money personally for any of these. So most of the projects, I'll put in money, you know, handling marketing or working with the artists, etc. I don't I don't need to recoup. I don't want to recoup. I'm creating some of these projects specifically for these charities. So whether it's a Line of Fire, the Line of Fire maxi single, for example, 100% of that. And this is a single with, Chuck D, with Brother Ali, with Speech, with Doug Wimbish, with Lord Jamar, with Sadat X, with Black Medine, with Bobby J from Rockaway. All of these, because it's a 3-song maxi single. This is a decent project, and a lot of people are listening. People are going to buy it. All that goes back to Punks for Autism. 16 Tons, the remix that I recently did with King Dude, that it's blown up, and streaming and everything. All of that right back to Punks for Autism, because it's more important for me to give back to these charities so that they can help the communities that I support and that I personally want to help. It's important for me to do what I can with the platform that I have and with the music that I create to benefit them. Um, and I'm in a position now where the music that I create does generate enough money for them to you know, for the donation to be of value. And it doesn't matter to me that I'm not making any money, that I'm losing money off of it. I don't. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I want to help. I said this earlier. I want to help the charities. I want to help the artists. I want to help the producers. I want to help as many people as possible with the platform that I have, and that's what's important to me. That's at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's important for me to be able to be in a position where I can give back and where I can help. And if it makes a difference, then that makes me happy. That's important for me to know that um, you know I've made a difference, that I've benefited this charity, that I've benefited this artist, that I've given them an opportunity that they previously wouldn't have because of the work that I've done and the name that I have. And again, that's why I do this. A lot of a lot of artists will come to me and they'll say, how much how much are you charging for production? I I'm not going to charge you. I'll do this because I love the work you're doing. It's free. I've done free beats. I've given away production for free, and I did it August and I did it in May. Uh, I'm not. These aren't. I'm not giving away beats that a lot of producers will have tiered beats where they have these garbage beats that they're not going to give to anyone, and then they have their premium beats that I'm going to try to push to Busta Rhymes and Nas. I don't do that. I don't separate my production like that. The way I look at it is I have production. I could either visualize production with an artist or I can't. If I can't visualize it with any of these, hundreds of artists that I have floating around in my head, then I'm going to set it aside and say, you know what, you can have it. If you want it for free, it's yours. And I've done that. A lot of the projects that I started, actually, Dynasty of Dominique Devereaux started with the free beats because I had the free beats out there. Indigo listened to a few of them and said, oh, can I grab these and can we start a project? That's how the foundation for a lot of these, some of these projects that I've knocked out over the past few months. They started from the free beats. Um, and for some people, it works out. They're able to release the EPs. Sometimes they're releasing albums. Some of the songs are getting picked up. They're getting on Spotify playlists. So and it's free.
Yeah.
I'm giving it to you, and I'm mixing and mastering all these songs because I want to make sure that what you're releasing is the best possible quality. I'm not going to just give you an MP3, let you record from that, and then you're putting out a subpar song. And I want to make sure that you are presented in the best possible light. Within my production, I'm here to help you. So I'm not making any money off of this. The artists are making money off of this, and that's perfectly fine because I'm giving them that opportunity that they typically wouldn't have. They get a chance to have Chrome production for free, and I'm more than happy to give it to them.
And with the talent like you, um, it's very beneficial for them. Much respect on that.
Thank you. Uh, Yeah, it's just important for me to again make sure that I give back as much as possible, because is when you've been in the industry as long as I have, there's so many snakes, and I've seen that, I've identified it, and I never want to be that type of person. That type of person who's only in it for the money, who's only trying to step on someone else's back to get to a higher level. That's never been me. That's never been the type of person I am. So I try to again, you know, give back as much as possible, but also surround myself with individuals that I know are also you know good people, outside of music. Um, you know, People who, they know me by my first name, and I know about their family. I know about, their kids, and I connect I connect myself with people that I know are solid humans, um, and those are the people that I come back to when I'm creating music that um, I can relate with, I connect with outside of just music. That I know we have interests that you know go past you know what we're putting out on Spotify or vinyl or CD.
That's great. Speaking of giving back, my freshman year in college, when I was down in Miami,
Hmm.
I donated blood, and I never really paid attention to my blood type
Hmm.
before then. And it was explained that I was a universal blood type,
Hmm.
and they explained how you, being a universal donor works out.
Right.
That really hit me, how something like that can benefit so many other
Yeah.
people.
Definitely.
So,
Definitely.
I mean, ever since then, I've been consistently donating blood.
That's good. It's important to, if you have the opportunity to help others, it's important to take advantage of those opportunities. You know, whether it's through blood or it's through the music or through charity work. If you can give back, it's important to do that.
Absolutely. And the last question:
Hmm.
where did the name Krohme come from?
Chrome. So I actually didn't start out as Chrome. I started out as high tech. I was a graffiti writer. And I wrote as high tech. I also wrote as Jedi and also wrote as Method. But I was high tech up until '97, and then Mood dropped the Doom album, and high tech, the producer, uh, produced. I think he produced all of that, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But you buy the album, you look, and you see the name high tech. So I was like, well, I can't go by high tech anymore. And this was the '97 was when I had just started producing. I got a drum machine and I started, playing around with beats. I'm not going to get into that whole process of how I made the production because it's pretty complex. But I didn't have a name, so I was still producing. I don't remember what I was going by around that time. I think I went back to Jedi, um, which wasn't going to fly anyway. But around '98, I was taking the train up into Maryland, and there was this homeless guy who I would always see on the platform, who would sell incense. He would sell books, and he started talking to me. We started having conversations, just talking about things. I was a young dude, and he's just talking about. Um, a lot of things that I had expressed interest in. We would
Mm-hmm.
talk about Black Panthers, for example. We would talk about Huey and Bobby Seale, because he had a lot of those books that he was selling. I don't know where he got the books, but we would strike up conversations about um, uh, really about that movement. And at one point, I was telling him, what I was doing and what I wanted to accomplish, and he said, "Hey, you keep going because you're gonna shine like chrome. The way you're moving. I could see it. You're gonna be shining like chrome." And I said, "Chrome. I like that. Maybe I should call myself Chrome." Um, and that's where it came from. This dude on the train who it was like crazy things. At one point, we were having a conversation. There's a drunk dude tried to start a fight, and those two started fighting. And the dude pulled out a gun, and it
Right.
got crazy. But anyway, that's where Chrome came from. It came from this guy that I had conversations with on the train, who really uh, he laid he dropped some jewels. He dropped some jewels for a young 18, 19-year old that I absorbed. You start learning more about um, your history, your ancestry, that you weren't learning. These are things you're not learning about this in school. You're not learning about, and you wouldn't have. Um, you start learning about Marcus Garvey. You start learning about oh, Steve Biko. You start learning about people that are from your culture, that are from your, your ethnicity, that you weren't learning about in school. Everybody knows about Malcolm, but and everybody knows about Dr. King, but there's way more to Black American. Obviously, Marcus Garvey is but Black American history that we weren't fully taught in schools, and I started to get that from him through the books that he had, um, and so that laid the foundation for me.
Now, you were mentioning high tech with reflection eternal, and
Mhm,
that also being your name at that time.
mhm,
Um, During the mid to late 90s, there was a MC from the Bronx
mhm.
on the underground called High Tech. It was spelled a little different. I think it was HI with the hyphen and then Tech TECH. He has
Mm.
some nice joints out there. Book of Life, All Time Einstein, Text Technique, 24/7. Yeah, he has some joints out there.
Mm. I spelled it exactly like high tech. It was HITEK. It was
Mm.
HI dash TEK. So I was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. So it
That's
became
like,
Chrome, which no one can spell correctly anyway. So I spelled it almost phonetically, Chrome. So it's Krohme. So it's almost
mhm.
phonetic, thinking that it would be easier to spell, but everyone's trying to spell it like Chrome. So they do KH,
H.
so KHROME or KROME. I mean, most people don't spell it correctly, which is why I have a lot of people saying, "Oh, I can't find your music. Like, how can you not find my music? It's everywhere." They're not spelling it correctly.
Yeah.
Um, so but yeah, that's where Chrome came from. And I started using Chrome about '99, and then um, that was when I started producing. Really started to dig more into production, and um, you know, it went from there. I think once I really had that name, then um, I kind of ran with it. Although with a name like Chrome, you would have thought that I would have been around that time creating the jiggy shiny suit beats that was coming
Around
out
the
of
time, yeah.
Bad Boy around that time, which is what I wasn't doing. I was making what I make now, which is the same things I was making in '97, the dusty drum breaks and jazz, rock samples. That's the type of music I was making then and still make now. There's not much of a evolutionary process, but
Mhm.
I build upon that foundation.
And we appreciate Chrome taking his time to speak with us, not only about his new album, The Ceremony of Innocence, but also, his life, his drive, the music that he blends from different genres, which is definitely, I enjoy that dark feel that you bring to it. And if anyone is not familiar with Chrome, this new album will make you a fan.
Thank you.
As always, give your shout outs and where they can go and support Ceremony of Innocence, First Earth, your EPs coming out in the little Phoenix, Impulse.
All right, all that. Across social media, it's Chrome Beats, KROHME Beats. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find me on all streaming platforms. The new album, Ceremony of Innocence, as well as Curse to Earth, are available through Man Bites Dog. You can catch that on their Bandcamp page. We have vinyl. There you go. We have vinyl. We have CD. We have cassettes for Ceremony of Innocence. We also have CDs for Curse to Earth. Um, and any of the other projects, you can find those. Uh, if you go to any of my my pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have links to everything, and you can catch Line of Fire. You can catch all the projects with Indigo, Impulse, LMNO, everyone. All of that is there. So you can check that out. Thank you.
Dope, dope. And on behalf of our HHDG Media Inc. crew, I'm going to say peace.
Peace. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everyone listening, tuning in. Much love to everyone. Much love to you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.